heavy oak doors of the chapel were closed, sealing in the silence of 300 guests. The air smelled of expensive lilies and anticipation. I stood at the altar, the lace of my veil itching slightly against my bare shoulders. Opposite me stood Riggs, my fiancé, looking dashing in his tuxedo, though his eyes were glazed over with boredom. Beside me was Juna, my maid of honor and best friend of 10 years, clutching my bouquet of white roses. The priest cleared his throat, a sound that echoed in the vaulted ceiling. He smiled warmly at us and nodded, signaling it was time for the vows we had promised to write ourselves. Riggs went first, reciting generic lines about loyalty and love that he had likely copied from the internet 10 minutes ago. Then it was my turn. I reached into the hidden pocket of my wedding dress, but instead of pulling out a handwritten card on heavy cardstock, I pulled out my smartphone. A ripple of confusion went through the front row. I smiled, a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes and brought the microphone close to my lips. I didn't have time to write new vows, I announced clearly, my voice steady. So I'll just read the messages Riggs sent to my maid of honor, Juna, last night. I unlocked the phone and read the first text. I can't wait until this boring ceremony is over so I can be in your bed tonight. The gasp from the congregation sucked the air out of the room. Behind me, I heard the soft thud of Juna dropping the bouquet. To understand why I stood there destroying my own wedding, we have to go back exactly 24 hours. It was the night before the ceremony. I was in the bridal suite, stressing over the placement of the centerpieces and making sure the gift bags were perfect. Juna was there, supposedly helping me, but mostly drinking the champagne meant for the guests. She told me she was going to jump in the shower to freshen up for the rehearsal dinner. She left her phone on the marble vanity, right next to where I was arranging flowers. I wasn't a suspicious person. I trusted Juna with my life and I trusted Riggs with my heart. But then a notification pinged on her screen. It lit up the dim room. I glanced over, expecting to see a text from her mom or a date. Instead, the name Riggs flashed across the lock screen. The message preview was visible, and it froze the blood in my veins. It read, "She's so clueless. Just act sad when I leave her at the reception." My heart stopped beating for a terrifying second. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a cold, terrible clarity wash over me, sharpening my senses like a knife. I reached out and picked up the phone. I knew Juna's passcode. It was her birthday, a date I had celebrated with her for a decade. My fingers didn't tremble as I typed the numbers in. I opened the messaging app and scrolled. The conversation wasn't new. It went back 6 months. The betrayal wasn't just a one-time mistake, it was a lifestyle. I stood by the sink, scrolling through hundreds of messages, each one a fresh stab to my chest. But it wasn't just the cheating that broke me, it was the cruelty. They were mocking me. I found a text from Riggs sent a week ago. "I only stayed for the wedding money. Her dad's check will cover our trip to Cabo." I felt bile rise in my throat. I swallowed it down and kept reading. Juna had replied, "I hate that dress she picked. She looks like a stuffed sausage in it. I can't believe she thinks she looks good." The emotional abuse was palpable. They laughed at my excitement, my planning, and my love. I vomited in the sink, the physical reaction to their poison finally hitting me. Then I washed my face with cold water. I looked at myself in the mirror. The sad, deceived Tamsin was gone. In her place was someone who wouldn't just cancel a wedding, she would execute a master plan. It was 3:00 a.m., and the hotel room was dark. Juna was asleep in the bed next to mine, breathing softly, completely unaware that I had screenshotted every single incriminating message and sent them to my cloud storage. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing with logistics. I grabbed my laptop and went into the bathroom, locking the door. I logged into our joint bank accounts. Riggs had always been terrible with money, leaving the management to me. My eyes widened as I looked at the transaction history. Pending transfers showed that Riggs had already moved $15,000 of our wedding gift money from my relatives, into a private account I didn't have access to. He was funding his exit strategy before we even said, "I do." My fingers flew across the keyboard. I called the 24-hour fraud line for our bank. Because my name was the primary account holder on our joint assets, I had the authority to freeze them. I transferred my share of the savings, plus the money he tried to steal, into a new, secure account at a different bank. By the time the sun began to rise, I had secured my financial safety. Riggs was waking up to a frozen account, but he wouldn't know it until his card was declined. The morning of the wedding was a performance worthy of an Academy Award. The sunlight streamed into the suite, brightening the room that felt like a tomb to me. Juna woke up stretching, acting the part of the doting best friend. She poured us mimosas, smiling that fake, bright smile I had loved yesterday and despised today. "You look beautiful, Tamsin," she lied, smoothing my hair. "Riggs is going to cry when he sees you." I took the glass from her, fighting the urge to throw the orange juice in her face. Instead, I hugged her back, feeling her stiffen slightly. I whispered, "I couldn't do this without you, Juna. You're the sister I never had." I felt her relax, thinking her secret was safe. She had no idea she was hugging a ghost. The tension in the room was suffocating, at least for me. Every kind word she said felt like a slap. Every time she checked her phone, I knew she was texting him. I played the role of the nervous, happy bride perfectly, burying my rage deep inside where it could burn hot and steady until the moment was right. It was time to put on the dress. The heavy satin gown hung on the doorframe, the one Juna had called a stuffed sausage casing. I stepped into it, feeling the fabric cinch around my waist. I looked in the full-length mirror. I didn't see a sausage. I saw a warrior putting on armor. I wasn't dressing for Riggs anymore, I was dressing for war. I adjusted the bodice, ensuring everything was perfect. I would look flawless when I destroyed them. Just then the door opened and Solange, Riggs' mother, walked in. She was a wealthy, judgmental woman who had never thought I was good enough for her golden boy. She looked me up and down, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Try to suck in, dear," she said, patting her own flat stomach. "Riggs likes fit women. We wouldn't want the photos to be unflattering." In the past, her comment would have crushed me. I would have felt insecure and small. Today, I simply smiled at her reflection in the mirror. "Don't worry, Solange," I said. "The photos will be unforgettable." She didn't catch the double meaning. She just smirked and walked away, unaware that she was about to become collateral damage in the explosion her son had created. I walked out of the suite and bumped into Calloway, our wedding photographer. He looked pale and nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He and I had gone to college together, and he was the one vendor I truly trusted. "Tamsin," he said, his voice low. "Can I talk to you for a second? It's important." He pulled me into a quiet alcove away from the bridesmaids. He held up his camera. "I was editing some test shots from the rehearsal dinner last night," he said, looking sick. "I caught something in the background of a candid." He showed me the display screen. The focus was on a flower arrangement, but in the blurred background it was unmistakable. Riggs was backed into a corner with Juna, his hand firmly grabbing her backside, their faces inches apart. Calloway looked at me with pity. "Do you want to cancel? I can drive you out of here right now." I looked at the photo. It was the final nail in the coffin. "No," I said, my voice calm. "Send me that file immediately. I need it for the projector during the ceremony." Calloway's eyes went wide, but he nodded slowly. "You got it, boss." The organ music swelled, signaling the beginning of the procession. The doors opened and the guests stood up, turning to watch me. My father took my arm, squeezing it gently. He thought he was walking his daughter into a happy future. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the white runner. The walk felt miles long. I locked eyes with Riggs at the end of the aisle. He was shifting his weight, checking his expensive watch, looking like he had somewhere better to be. When he saw me coming, he pasted on his fake groom smile. It was a practiced, hollow expression I had seen 1,000 times but never truly recognized until now. I felt a surge of power coursing through my veins. I wasn't walking toward a marriage. I was walking toward my freedom. I clutched my bouquet of white roses tightly. Buried deep within the petals was my phone, the screen brightness turned up to the maximum. Every step brought me closer to the end of my life as a doormat. I kept my head high, my face serene. No one knew that under the lace and silk, I was carrying a grenade. We are back in the present moment at the altar. The echo of my voice reading that first text message was still bouncing off the stone walls of the church. The shock in the room was a physical weight. Riggs blinked, his fake smile faltering into a confused frown. He chuckled nervously, looking at the guests as if to share a joke. "Tamsin," he said, stepping toward me. "Stop! You're hysterical. Put the phone away, everyone is watching." He reached for my arm, trying to take control, trying to make me look like the crazy one. I took a sharp step back, raising my hand to silence him. The movement was so authoritative that he actually froze. "I'm not done, Riggs," I said into the microphone, my voice booming. "We haven't gotten to the part about your mother yet." In the front row, Solange stood up, her pearls rattling. "What on earth are you doing?" she demanded, looking between me and her son. "This is highly inappropriate." "Sit down, Solange," I said coldly. "You'll want to hear this." I looked back at Riggs. The arrogance was draining from his face, replaced by the first flicker of genuine fear. He knew exactly what was on that phone. I scrolled to the next screenshot, ensuring my finger didn't tremble. I wanted Solange to hear every word. I brought the microphone back to my lips. "This is a text from Riggs to Juna, sent 3 days ago," I announced. I read the words with precise diction. "Don't worry about my mom. Solange is an old hag who will pay for anything if I smile at her. She's annoying, but her wallet is open." Solange's face turned a violent shade of purple. She gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She looked at her perfect son in absolute horror. The room was deadly silent. Riggs turned to his mother, his hands raised in surrender. "Mom, it was a joke. I didn't mean it." "An old hag," Solange whispered, her voice carrying in the quiet church. The alliance between Riggs and his mother fractured instantly. She had spent thousands on this wedding, doted on him and defended him, only to be mocked behind her back. She sank back into the pew, looking like she had been slapped. Riggs glared at me with pure hatred, but I just smiled. I was dismantling his support system, brick by brick. Juna, realizing the ship was sinking and she was on it, tried to make a run for it. She turned on her heel, aiming for the side exit door near the choir stand. I was faster. I stepped firmly on the long train of her maid of honor dress, jerking her back. She stumbled, nearly falling over. "Wait, Juna," I said, my voice cutting through the tension. "You can't leave yet. The guests need to hear your reply." I looked at the phone again. "Here is what my best friend had to say about our future." I read Juna's text loud and clear. "I hope Tamsin doesn't get pregnant on the honeymoon. I don't want to raise her brat when we eventually kick her out." The crowd turned on Juna instantly. A collective noise of disgust rose from the pews. My cousins stood up, looking ready to fight. Juna's parents, sitting in the second row, put their heads in their hands. Her social reputation was destroyed in seconds. She stood there, trapped by her own dress and her own malice, tears of embarrassment streaming down her face. She wasn't the victim, she was the villain, and now everyone knew it. "And just in case anyone thinks I'm making this up," I said, looking directly at Riggs, "or that these are fake messages, let's look at the evidence." I raised my left hand and signaled Calloway in the back. He was ready. The large projector screen behind the altar, which was meant to display a touching photo montage of our relationship set to Ed Sheeran, flickered to life. But there were no baby photos. Instead, the high-resolution image Calloway had taken at the rehearsal dinner filled the enormous screen. It showed Riggs grabbing Juna's butt in 4K clarity. Then the slides changed. Calloway cycled through the screenshots of the text messages I had sent him. The insults about my dress, the plans for Cabo, the comments about Solange. It was undeniable. It was massive. The guests stared up at the screen, mouths open. There was no spinning this. There was no, "it's not what it looks like." It was exactly what it looked like. Riggs looked at the screen, his face pale, realizing his mask had been ripped off in front of everyone he knew. Riggs finally snapped. His humiliation turned into aggression. He lunged toward me, though his best man held him back. "Fine," he screamed, his face red and ugly. "The wedding is off, I don't want you anyway, but I'm keeping the apartment. Get your stuff out by Monday." I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, amplified by the sound system. "Actually, Riggs, I read the lease again this morning." I paused for effect. "My name is the only one on the deed. You were listed merely as an occupant, and there is a clause about financial misconduct." I leaned in closer to his face. "Since you violated the morality clause of our cohabitation agreement by stealing funds from our joint account last night, I evicted you this morning. I filed the paperwork an hour ago. The locks have already been changed. Your clothes are currently in garbage bags on the curb." Riggs looked like he had been punched in the gut. He owned nothing. He had no home. He had no access to money. He stared at me, realizing he had underestimated me completely. I turned away from Riggs and addressed the stunned guests. "I apologize for wasting your Saturday," I said, my voice softening. Obviously, there will be no reception. There is no cake to cut, and there will be no first dance. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my bodice, the contract for the venue. However, I continued, I know many of you traveled far to be here, so feel free to enjoy the open bar and the appetizers at the reception hall for the next hour. It's on the groom's family. I held up the contract for Solange to see. Solange signed as the guarantor for the venue and catering. Since the cancellation is within 24 hours, the full balance is due. I'm not paying a dime. Solange let out a small shriek. The wedding cost tens of thousands of dollars, and now she was paying for a party celebrating her son's infidelity. I dropped the contract on the floor at Riggs's feet. It was the final financial blow. I had protected my assets and saddled them with the debt of their own disaster. The church was vibrating with energy. I looked at Riggs one last time. He was defeated, small, and pathetic. Juno was sobbing into her hands. Solange was hyperventilating. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt lighter than air. I loosened my grip on the microphone and let it drop. It hit the stone floor with a loud thud that echoed like a gavel strike. I turned around, my back to the altar, and began to walk back down the aisle alone. The guests parted like the Red Sea. No one said a word. Some people looked shocked, but my friends started to slow clap. Then my family joined in. I walked past them, my head high. When I reached the heavy oak doors, I stopped. I reached up and ripped the veil off my head. I tossed it onto a pew. I didn't need it. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the bright, blinding sunlight. The getaway car was waiting at the curb. I got into the backseat alone, told the driver to drive, and didn't look back. I didn't know it at the moment, but my exit wasn't the end of the story. A teenage cousin sitting in the back row had live-streamed the entire confrontation on TikTok. By the time I checked into a luxury hotel downtown, using the money intended for the honeymoon, the video had gone viral. I sat on the hotel bed and opened my phone. The video had 5 million views in 3 hours. The hashtag #read the texts was trending worldwide. Strangers were hailing me as a hero of self-respect. Queen behavior, one comment read. This is how you handle a cheater, said another. But the internet is a double-edged sword. Riggs and Juno were being identified in the comments. People had found their LinkedIn profiles and their Instagram accounts. They were being doxxed. Their public humiliation was now global. I watched the view count tick up and up. I hadn't planned for the whole world to see it, but I couldn't say I was sorry. They wanted to make me look like a fool. Instead, they became the world's biggest joke. An hour later, there was a frantic pounding on my hotel room door. I checked the peephole. It was Riggs. He looked disheveled, his tie undone, sweating profusely. He had used the Find My Friends app to track my phone before I remembered to turn it off. Tamsin, open the door, he screamed, banging his fist against the wood. You humiliated me. You ruined my life. Open this door right now. I didn't undo the latch. I didn't panic. I walked over to the phone on the nightstand and called hotel security. Then I walked to the door and spoke through the wood. You humiliated yourself, Riggs, I said calmly. I didn't write those texts. You did. I didn't cheat. You did. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see who you really are. I'm going to sue you, he yelled. Good luck with that, I replied. Security is on the way. 2 minutes later, I heard heavy footsteps and a struggle in the hallway. Let go of me, Riggs shouted as he was dragged away. Then, silence. I went back to the bed and ordered room service. Monday morning came with a brutal reality check for Riggs. He tried to walk into his office at a high-end financial firm, attempting to act as if nothing had happened. He thought he could separate his personal life from his professional one. He was wrong. His boss called him into the glass-walled office immediately. The firm managed high-profile clients who valued discretion and integrity. The viral video, with millions of views, made Riggs a massive liability. No one wants their money managed by a man who steals from his fiancé and insults his own mother publicly. We can't have a liar managing our accounts, Riggs, his boss said, sliding a termination letter across the desk. This reflects poorly on the firm's judgment. Riggs tried to argue, but it was useless. He was fired for conduct unbecoming, which meant he lost his severance package too. He was escorted out of the building by security, holding a cardboard box, just like he had been escorted out of my life. The viral fame had cost him his career. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from a new number. I knew immediately who it was. It was Juna. The text was a wall of desperation. "Tamsin, please, you have to take the video down. People are sending me death threats. My parents won't speak to me. I've lost everything. I can't leave my house. Please, I'm begging you. We were best friends." I looked at the screen, remembering the text where she called me a stuffed sausage and hoped I wouldn't get pregnant. She didn't care about me. She cared that she got caught. She wanted mercy after showing none. I typed my first and only response to her. "You lost everything when you decided to sleep with my fiancé in my bed. You made your choice. Don't contact me again." I hit send, then immediately blocked the number. I didn't feel a thrill of revenge. I just felt a sense of closure. She was part of my past now, a lesson learned in loyalty. I deleted the thread and put the phone down. The breakup was messy, but the finances were criminal. On Tuesday, I met with a forensic accountant to ensure my assets were fully detangled from Riggs. We went through the credit card statements line by line. What we found made my blood boil. There were charges on a credit card in my name, one I rarely used, for a diamond bracelet and expensive dinners. The dates matched the nights Riggs said he was working late. He had opened the card as an authorized user without my permission. "This is fraud," the accountant said, circling the charges. "Since you weren't married, this isn't marital debt. This is identity theft." I didn't hesitate. I drove to the police station and filed a formal report. I handed over the statements and the evidence. This wasn't just a bad breakup anymore. It was a criminal investigation. Riggs had stolen from me to woo his mistress. Now, he would have to answer to the law. I walked out of the station knowing I had done the right thing. Solange was the next to crack. She reached out on Wednesday, her tone completely different from the haughty woman at the wedding. She was desperate to save face in her social circle, where the video was the only topic of conversation. "Tamsin, darling," she purred over the phone. "This has all been such a misunderstanding. I'm willing to pay you back for the dress and the flowers. I'll write you a check today." "What's the catch, Solange?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "I just need you to issue a public statement," she said quickly. "Just say that Riggs is a good man who made a mistake and that the video was exaggerated. We need to stop the bleeding." I laughed out loud. "Solange, your son called you a hag. He mocked your generosity, and you want me to lie for him." "I'll give you double the cost of the dress," she pleaded. "Keep your money," I said. "You're going to need it for his bail and for the therapy you clearly need." I hung up. Her reputation was her problem, not mine. Riggs, cornered and desperate, tried the only move he had left. He found a shady lawyer who agreed to file a defamation lawsuit against me. He claimed that reading the texts caused him irreparable harm and emotional distress. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Verna, whom I paid with the money I saved from the wedding, laughed when she saw the filing. We went to court for the preliminary hearing. The judge looked at the evidence. He looked at the screenshots. He looked at the viral video where I simply read Riggs's own words. "Truth is an absolute defense against defamation, counselor," the judge told Riggs's lawyer. "She didn't lie. She read what your client wrote. If the truth ruined his reputation, that is his fault, not hers." The judge dismissed the case immediately with prejudice, meaning he couldn't refile. He actually scolded Riggs in open court for wasting the judicial system's time with a frivolous lawsuit. Riggs walked out of the courtroom with his head down, legally and socially branded a liar. Riggs was now broke, jobless, homeless, and drowning in legal fees. He had hit rock bottom. I heard the end of the story from a friend of mine who works in the city's jewelry district. Desperate for cash, Riggs went to a pawn shop to sell the engagement ring I had returned to him. He had always bragged that it was a $20,000 diamond, an heirloom quality stone. He walked up to the counter, expecting a big payout to save him. The pawn shop owner put his loupe to his eye and inspected the stone. He laughed. "This isn't a diamond, buddy. It's cubic zirconia. A decent fake, but it's glass. It's worth maybe $50 for the gold setting." Riggs stood there, stunned. He had been scammed by the jeweler he bought it from, or perhaps he had known all along and was just that cheap. The final symbol of our love, the rock I had worn on my finger, was worthless trash. It was the perfect metaphor for our relationship. He sold it for $45 and walked out into the rain. 6 months later, the dust had finally settled. I was sitting at a sidewalk cafe, sipping a latte. Calloway was sitting across from me. We weren't dating, not yet, but there was a spark there, a genuine connection built on honesty. We were laughing about his new photography portfolio, which now featured drama-free weddings only. I looked across the street and saw a familiar figure. It was Juna. She was wearing a uniform, wiping down tables at a diner. She looked tired, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She had lost her corporate job after the scandal and was working double shifts to make rent. Our eyes met for a brief second through the glass. She paused, looking at me with a mixture of sadness and regret. In the past, I would have felt angry. I would have wanted to yell at her. But now, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hate, just indifference. She was a stranger to me. I turned back to Calloway and smiled, continuing our conversation. When I got home that evening, there was a letter in my mailbox from the district attorney's office. It was an update on the fraud case. They were moving forward with charges against Riggs for identity theft and credit card fraud. He was facing probation and hefty fines. Justice was grinding forward, slow but sure. I took the letter to my balcony. I didn't need to keep it. I struck a match and held it to the corner of the paper, watching the flame curl the edges and turn the words to ash. I dropped it into an ashtray and watched the smoke rise into the night sky. I checked my phone. No blocked messages, no drama, no lies, just peace. I had rebuilt my life from the ashes of that wedding day. My business was booming, my bank account was secure, and my heart was healing. I took a sip of my coffee and looked out at the city lights. I had lost a fiancé and a best friend that day, but I found the one person I had been neglecting for years, myself.